excited about the conversation I'm about to have with Tom Gilson. And Tom, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me right now as we're going to discuss your new book, which is about someone I have tremendous amount of respect for, a guy named Jesus.
Right.
And we're going to talk about that. But Tom, could you just share a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. But first of all, thank you for inviting me on your channel here. I am a senior editor with The Stream at stream.org. We're a national Christian daily website giving a Christian perspective on current events. And I've been doing that for 5 years now, I guess. Before that, I was in senior leadership with Ratio Christi, and before that, a lot of years in music ministry, web ministry, human resources, all kinds of things. Eventually, strategic leadership with Campus Crusade for Christ, now known as Cru. So I've been in ministry for a whole bunch of years, and my wife and I, we live in Dayton, Ohio area. We've got 2 married kids, and one of them lives nearby. The other one is an Army wife. Her husband actually is just in quarantine right now, heading out for a deployment. So she's in that transition. And no dogs, no pets, but we do have 2 grand dogs, 1 grand cat, and 2 grand bunnies. Grandchild on the way.
Well, congratulations to all of that. It's actually nice to have grand pets and that you can pet them and enjoy them, but not have to clean up after them. So
that's exactly right. Yes. I've heard the same goes for grandchildren in a way too. I'm looking forward to that.
I'm sure you are. Now, your new book, which is called Too Good to Be False, which I love the title, by the way. I just think that is brilliant. So often we will hear a claim about something, oh, that's too good to be true. And what a wonderful twist on that. But before we get into that, you've written other books as well. Is that correct?
Yes. I've got several books that I've either written or edited. The first traditionally published edited book was True Reason, Confronting the Irrationality of the New Atheism, came out around the time of what they called the Reason Rally, an atheist rally in Washington, D.C. in 2012. A couple other books, How Would Jesus Blog, self-published that. A Christian Mind, I self-published that. Those are both related to my Thinking Christian blog at thinkingchristian.net. And then Kriegel Publications also put out the book I wrote for parents to help them navigate the question of homosexuality with their kids. And it's called Critical Conversations, a Christian Parent's Guide to Discussing Homosexuality with Teens.
So what was it that led you to write this new book focused on Jesus?
You know, a lot of things. One of them was a study of Jesus. And the more I looked at him, the more I spent time thinking about Jesus, and the more I looked at him from a new perspective, which we'll get into later on, that I don't think other people have used, the more I realized he's more awesome than I ever realized, even after 40 some years of following Jesus and studying the Bible and reading the Bible. He's better than I realized. He's more amazing than I realized. The first specific application of that was, it actually came out in a blog post that I developed into a talk maybe 6 years ago, which I also called Too Good to Be False. And it was about Jesus' incredible love, signified by the fact that no one else ever in history, no one else in literature, no one else in the movies, no one else in mythology, no one else has ever had as much power as the story says Jesus has, and been as self-sacrificial as the story says Jesus is. So, you can just look at the story and you see something really, really unusual about Jesus as a character, as a person to read about. But he's also true, because who made a story up like that? that was really the seed out of which this book grew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I was reading it, it got me thinking about uh, apologetics, and I've been involved in apologetics for a long time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of times that we have discussions about all kinds of different things. And I'm not saying it's wrong to do that. I mean, I have all kinds of interests, and I like to have discussions about numerous topics.
Hmm.
But we need to focus on Jesus, because we can convince someone of our opinion on some kind of side issue, but without Jesus, what's the
Yeah.
point? So without discounting the importance of those other things, for us to focus on Jesus and how amazing he is and how unique Jesus is, I just thought that that was such an important step for you to be taking, and an important message to be sharing with the church and with seekers as well.
Well, thanks. Yeah. And, a lot of my writing, most of my writing has to do with Christianity and culture. And unfortunately, a lot of that has to do with it's confrontational in the sense it's looking at what's wrong with culture and comparing it with what Christianity teaches. My wife, who said, "Do you want that to be your whole body of work?" And it never has been, but I've written about specifically Jesus on my blog frequently, but she was right. I wanted a book that really focused on him because, uh, just as you said, he's the core, he's the center, and the more you study him, the more attractive he is. And I wanted to make that clear. He's he's not just some guy, he's certainly not just someone who came along to tell us what not to do. He's a very attractive leader, someone you want to follow if you get to know him.
Excellent. Yeah, that's the total response that I had as I was
Hmm.
reading that book. Now, you were saying that you take a bit of a different perspective, and
Yeah.
it's one, though, that is both new and old. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. What's new about it to our generation, and you have to go back 100 years, 150 years, or even 200 years to see it in other writings. What's new about it is that I didn't spend so much time looking at what Jesus did. We're all familiar with what Jesus did. Christians are, at least. We've studied the stories. They're familiar to us. So how are you going to draw anything new out of that? Well, I looked at what Jesus didn't do. For example, with his great love, I, he's the only great person in terms of having great power in all history and literature who never used his extraordinary power for his own benefit. That's something he didn't do. Um, he never walked away from a conversation going, "I could have said that better." He just didn't. He never said, "Our Father." The disciples did, and at one point he told them to say that, but for him it was always "My Father." Um, and there's just a number of things. He didn't lead the way you're supposed to lead. My goodness. I've got a degree in organizational psychology. I've done leadership studies. He broke some really important leadership rules. Um, he should have failed as a leader because he never asked his people for their advice. He never said, "What's your opinion?" You don't see him growing from his mistakes. You don't see him learning from experience. You don't see him getting better. Who wants to be under a leader who never improves? Well, as I kind of joked in the book, you'd have to be God in the flesh to succeed with a leadership profile like that. Well, okay, he succeeded. These are things that are just Jesus didn't do what you would expect a religious founder or a great leader to do.
Which is part of the reason why we can be
Hmm.
confident that it's not a legend, it's not a made up story, because Jesus seems to make all these mistakes,
Yeah.
and yet succeeds. So that is part of that unique story of Jesus. Now, in your book, you quote a lot of older authors, maybe even some that some readers are not familiar with. What
Right.
drew you to those particular sources?
Well, I was asking around. I wondered whether anybody had looked at Jesus, especially the part about, um, especially the question of where did this supposed legend come from? In other words, I was I was seeing this as you've said already as a sign that this didn't that this couldn't be a legend because if because no one else ever made up a story like this. No one ever invented a character as self-sacrificially good as Jesus. No one, including Shakespeare, Goethe, Dostoevsky, Sophocles. You just don't find it. So did the followers of Jesus just kind of invent him as a legend? That doesn't make sense. Well, I was asking about that, and I thought, has anybody else asked that question? Has anybody written on it? A couple of people, my friend Tim McGrew, the apologist, philosopher, good friend at Western Michigan University, is also an expert in historic Christian texts, especially apologetics. And he steered me to Philip Schaff and Horace Bushnell and some others who have written on it. The publisher Nathan Ward with De Ward Publishing, who's published the book, he steered me to C.A. Rowe and perhaps a couple of others. I'm kind of getting confused as to who sent me where, but I wanted to find someone who'd said this before. I wanted to make sure I wasn't going off on some wild heretical track too. You come up with something new about Jesus, you do not want it to be so new that it's wrong. And so I got really good assurance that this was still really on track with Orthodox Christianity.
Yeah, that was good. And as I was reading it, I could see the influence of Tim McGrew because I having gotten to know him a little bit,
Yeah.
he has been great for reminding people that we don't just have to read the apologists of the last 20 years, but there's
Right.
some really good stuff out there
My
in
goodness,
the past
yes.
100 years. So those are good reminders for us.
Yeah. Oh, I should have mentioned William Paley too. Oh,
Yeah,
you can't talk about historical apologetics and Tim McGrew without mentioning William Paley. That
yeah.
was the other important name. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it was through the influence of Tim that I read Paley for the first time. So that was,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yep.
those are good reminders
Yep.
for us. One of the other things I appreciated about the book is it seemed to speak both to the mind and the heart. So there was an
Oh.
intellectual aspect of it for sure,
Mm-hmm.
which makes sense with your background explaining the how Jesus is unique and how he was different and things that would make sense for someone who's wrestling with those things uh, in an intellectual way. But
Right.
at the same time, as you spoke about how great Jesus was, there was an emotional reaction too. It's
Yeah.
about describing this figure as being someone who is attractive in a
Mm-hmm.
spiritual sense that I
Mm-hmm.
think is an important balance that's needed in apologetics. Sometimes we're so afraid of the emotional side, we're so afraid of the
Yeah.
experiential side that we go for a purely intellectual apologetic.
Mm-hmm.
Yet that's not who we are. We have both mind and heart, and so that's one
Yeah.
of the things I really appreciated about the book.
Well, thank you for saying that. There was something about the whole process of studying this. I was talking about this. Actually, the earlier version of the study, when it was about um, strictly about Jesus' self-sacrificial love, that I try to imagine being as good as Jesus. I think of having coming into some incredible power, which in my case, I can imagine is economic. Like if someone I don't play the lottery, but if someone played the lottery and won a billion and gave it to me. That would still be a lot less power than Jesus had at his command. But he gave it all away. And I can't imagine, if I were the most giving person in the world and I gave it all to missions, or to feeding the poor, or to stopping sex trafficking, or whatever, I'd still probably take my wife out for a nice dinner on it. I mean, you don't even see Jesus when at the end of 40 days, he was hungry, it says, after his fasting, and Satan pointed out quite rightly to him that he could make stones into bread, and he didn't. I try to imagine being that focused on others and that self-denying, and I almost crumble to my knees, and I say, "You are so much better than me, Jesus." I have known for decades that Jesus is God, and therefore there's a doctrine that justifies worshiping him. But not until I did this study did I just fall to my knees and cry out, "You are my God." It drew that out on me.
I noticed that in reading it. It came across that as I was reading your description of Jesus, my thought was, he really believes this. He's not just describing Christian orthodoxy here. Like it came across that it was having an effect on you, and I appreciate that. I think that's a message that people need to hear. When I think back to my past, part of my process of becoming a Christian, I was watching Billy Graham crusades on television, and if you look at Billy Graham's sermons, I mean, he was a good preacher. I wouldn't say he's the best preacher ever, but he was a good preacher. But what came across was he really believes this. There was more than confidence, not a cockiness, but just an assurance that this Jesus that he's talking about is real. And again, it's that appealing both to the mind and the heart that is important.
Yeah.
So when you wrote Too Good to Be False, who did you have in mind as the target audience? Were you thinking specifically of Christians, of non-Christians, a mix of both?
Right. Who I most wanted to be reading it really is church members who need a fresh experience of Jesus and of confidence in him, so that people could really discover what it means to fall in love with Jesus and follow him for real, especially right now when more and more we're seeing movements of challenge and of conflict coming up against Jesus. So yeah, what I had in mind was I'm hoping Bible study leaders will have there. By the way, there are Bible study questions and study group questions in the back of the book. And so I was hoping people would use it that way in churches. However, there are 3 sections to the book, and the middle section names of atheists, skeptics, who are pretty sure Jesus is just a legend. And I hope that gets their attention. I hope they will respond to it. I hope they will realize they have to respond to it, because this is a significant new challenge to their beliefs. I'm sure they will figure out a way to answer it. I can't wait to see what it is. It's going to have to be very creative, because this is I think a difficult challenge for them to face. So I hope they respond. I'll be curious to see what they say.
Yeah, that would be great if you could catch that. And with the internet, you never know. I hear responses to my stuff from people that I would least expect. So
yeah,
that happens. So I once received a tweet from Richard Dawkins. So
you did. Wow.
Yeah, yes, and it was a nice one, surprisingly. So you never know.
Good for him. I'm proud of him.
Yeah, well, I think that that really is important for people to be drawn back to Jesus. Especially, we hear so much about high-profile Christians who lose their faith, whether they're Christian entertainers or pastors. And
Yeah.
we see our heroes falling regularly, and it can be discouraging to
Yeah.
people. And this book can be a good reminder that, yes, it is sad when those things happen, but that's not where our faith is. Our faith
Right.
is in Jesus, and
Right.
and it is that's a firm foundation for our faith. Our heroes, our human heroes, are always going to fail to some extent or not. Hopefully, it's not
Hmm.
going to be as bad as what we've seen in some recent examples, but
Right.
so I think that that's really good. I can also see some benefit though to some some seekers. I hope that
Yeah.
Christians are going to pass this on to
Yeah.
their friends and say, I realize you have all this baggage about what you think Christianity is about, but Christianity is actually about Jesus, and this is what you need to know. So that would be a helpful resource in that area as well.
I hope so. And we are bound to fail. We're not as good as Jesus. We're trying to follow him. I think I'm a better person as a Christian than I would have been without. I'm certain of that, absolutely certain of that. But that doesn't come close to the one who we're following. There's no comparison there. And we Christians, we need to represent Jesus well, but we need to remember that that's who we're representing and point people to him. I hope this helps do that.
I think that it will. Well, Tom, I really appreciate you taking some time to talk
Sure.
about this. And I read the book and I really appreciated it. And I think it's a great resource for Christians and non-Christians alike. And can you remind us again of your website that
Sure.
people can find you?
Yeah. Two places. One is the stream.org, where I'm part of a team, a high quality team of some really great editors, writers, contributors, and so on. And it's at stream.org. And my personal blog I've been doing for a decade and a half is Thinking Christian at thinkingchristian.net.
I'll include links to that in the show notes so
Mm-hmm.
people can get right to you. Well, thanks again, Tom. I really
Thanks, Stephen.
appreciate you taking the time, and God bless you. And thanks for reminding us about how awesome Jesus is.
Thank you, Stephen. Enjoyed talking with you.